Hello friends, in this video I am going to talk about the heart anatomy. It is a continuous series of lectures. Uh, Beg your pardon, this is a second lecture of the series. Heart anatomy is continue. Coverings of the heart. We are actually discussing the coverings of the heart. Firstly, it is covered externally by the pericardium. Pericardium is actually double-walled sac around the heart. When we discuss this microscopically, it is divided into fibrous pericardium, and serous pericardium. This fibrous pericardium, it is tough. It is made up of connective tissue and it provides threefold function to the heart. Means it helps us in anchoring of heart, it helps us in protection, or it gives protection to the heart, and it prevents heart from overfilling. It prevents the heart from overfilling. Microscopically, I have shown here, this portion is called the fibrous pericardium. Inner to fibrous pericardium, there is serous pericardium. It can be divided into two layers. One is called a parietal pericardium, this serous pericardium. It is also it covers, or we can say that it is interior to the fibrous pericardium. It is found interior to the fibrous pericardium. Then there is another pericardium, that's called visceral pericardium. This visceral pericardium is also called epicardium. In between the two layers, there is a presence of cavity called the pericordial cavity. There is the presence of pericordial cavity, contains a serous fluid, called pericordial fluid. I'll mention here, this is the parietal pericardium, this is visceral pericardium. In between there is a cavity called the pericordial cavity. It's a pericordial cavity. It contains fluid called pericordial fluid. This pericardial fluid helps the two layers to glide one over the other easily. So it, when the heart pumps, or we can say the pumps the blood, or it contracts or relaxes, these two layers of the pericardium, that's called the parietal and visceral, slide one over the other easily. So you must remember this thing. Pericardial fluid helps in gliding of two layers one over the other. Hence, smooth function of heart pump takes place. So I will review once again. In serous pericardium, there are two layers. One is called the parietal, another the visceral. In between them, there is a pericordial cavity, contains a fluid called pericordial fluid, which helps in gliding of the two layers with each other. This pericordial fluid helps. So there is a pathological condition. There is a pathological condition related to this pericardium, that is called pericarditis. What is this? It is actually inflammation of pericardium due to the less secretion of pericardial fluid. It creates a condition called pericardial friction rub. Means when these two layers, visceral layer and the parietal layer of the pericardium, when they glide one over the other, they produce a cracking sound. That very cracking sound is called the pericardial friction rub. Why cracking sound is produced? Because there is less secretion of the pericardial fluid. Another point, that's called the cardiac tamponade. What is cardiac tamponade? Cardiac tamponade means heart plug. Cardiac tamponade means heart plug. How this gets created? When there is excessive secretion goes towards the pericordial cavity. Excessive secretion of pericordial seeps into the pericordial cavity. So this excessive secretion compresses the heart. It compresses the heart. What happens then? It hinders the function of heart. So there is a feeling of pain in the chest. Patient feels pain in the sternal part of chest. This excessive secretion or excessive fluid can be drained. Excessive fluid can be drained off with the help of syringe. With the help of syringe. So this was a little information regarding the pericardium. Another part I will discuss here about the anatomy of the heart, that is called walls of heart. Now the first wall of heart is called the epicardium. What I have told you another name of epicardium? This is called visceral pericardium. Visceral pericardium. What is this epicardium now? It is the superficial layer of heart. Superficial layer of heart. In older people, it is filled with fat. In older people. So you remember this thing. Inner to epicardium there is myocardium. What is myocardium? Myocardium is main portion of heart. It is bulky portion, we call it as bulky portion. Then it contains the contractile muscles. Along with the muscles, there is the presence of connective tissue, of collagen and elastin. Abundant quantity में it is found in abundant quantity, the collagen and elastin. Connective tissue in the form of collagen and elastin forms fibrous skeleton of heart. What does it do? It reinforces the myocardium. Reinforces the myocardium and connects the heart valves and blood vessels. So you must remember this. Myocardium once again. This myocardium, this is the bulky portion of the heart. This portion is called the myocardium. I will mention with the help of a green marker. This is the myocardium. Bulky portion. The thickest chamber of the heart, that is the left ventricle. Then here these are the two auricles which I will discuss later on. what these auricles are. So this is the myocardium. It's a bulky portion of the heart. It contains the contractile muscles. This is the actually portion of the heart which have a contractile tissue which contracts with each other. Then it contains the connective tissue in the form of collagen and elastin, and it forms this collagen and elastin forms fibrous skeleton of the heart. This fibrous skeleton of the heart performs two functions. Fibrous skeleton of the heart performs two functions. You must remember this. First one, though it is a connective tissue, it doesn't conduct the electric impulse. Does not conduct electric impulse. So what happens? There is no conduction of direct spread of electrical potential. There is no direct spread of electrical impulse through the heart to other pathways. This is the first function. And second function, it anchors the blood vessels and valves of heart from over stretching, because heart is always in a pumping action. That means heart is called the pumping organ of the body, which shows systole and diastole, or which contracts and relaxes. This overstretching, or we can say the valves doesn't get into the respective auricles when there is a closure of what it called as the contraction of the ventricles takes place. This is prevented by the fibrous skeleton of the heart. So this is the myocardium. Another part of the heart that's called endocardium. Endocardium, it contains the endothelium, contains squamous epithelium, it covers the all heart chambers, it covers the blood vessels which are entering and leaving the heart, and also it covers the heart valves. I'll mention with the help of the another marker, that's blue. Here is an endocardium is continuous, it is not discontinuous. So endocardium, here also endocardium. Then I'll discuss the another portion of the heart, that's called associated chambers and great blood vessels. As you already know that our heart consists of four chambers. Heart consists of four chambers, of which two are called the atria and two ventricles. These two atria are superior, these are inferior. These are separated from each other with the help of a septum called the interarterial septum. And these are separated by the interventricular septum. And here I'll discuss in this diagram. This is the surface view of the heart. This is the surface view of heart. In this diagram, I'll show you the two grooves, or there are two visible grooves on the outer surface of the heart through which we can differentiate auricles from the ventricles, or through which we can differentiate right auricle from the right ventricle and left auricle from the left ventricle, or we can say we can differentiate the right ventricle from the left ventricle, right auricle from the left auricle. So here are two grooves. I'll mention here the grooves along with the vessels. The groove is like this. Here another groove. Like this. This is called interarterioventricular groove or coronary sulcus. What is coronary? It is actually a word comes from the corona. Corona means crown. What is this? It actually arises from here and it interwoves laterally to this heart, and it separates the two arteria, we can say the two auricles, from the ventricles, and it forms a it is called the coronary sulcus, or it forms a crown like structure. Another point, that is called the another groove. This one groove, right, in interarterioventricular groove, and second groove is called the anterior intra anterior intraventricular groove, which arises here and passes here and separates the right ventricle from the left ventricle, and it continues towards the apex of the heart and on the back side of the heart. So this is called the anterior, and this is here the posterior interventricular groove. So we can differentiate right auricle, this left auricle, right ventricle and left ventricle from each other with the help of the presence of visible grooves on the heart. So here now we will discuss the chambers of the heart by using this diagram. Chambers of heart. First, I will discuss the arteria. This is called the right auricle. This is the left auricle. This is right ventricle. This is left ventricle. This arteria, it means little ear. Externally, it's a smooth structure. We cannot differentiate this. Internally, here is a rough surface, and here is a rough structure like this. The cells here are called the pectinate muscles. Pectinate muscles. Pectinate means comb-like muscles. When we try to dig deep inside the auricles, what happens here? Here is a anterior part and posterior part. Anterior part, in between the anterior and posterior part, there is a ridge. There is a ridge-like structure. Anterior part, posterior part. Anterior part is smooth, posterior part is rough. In between them there is a C-shaped ridge called crista terminalis. So remember this term as well. Then I'll try to discuss the arteria. These arteria are called the receiving chambers of heart. Receiving chambers. That means they receive the blood. This is called superior vena cava. and this is the inferior vena cava. This receives blood from the lower parts of the body, or we can say they receives blood below from diaphragm, receives blood below from diaphragm, and it receives blood above the diaphragm, above the diaphragm. And this right auricle also receives the blood from the myocardium with the help of a blood vessel called the coronary vessels, coronary arteries. So it receives the blood from the coronary veins, through coronary veins. Blood drains from myocardium into the right auricle. So you must remember, this right auricle receives the blood from all cells of the body, we can say the tissues, superior through by means of a superior vena cava, by means of inferior vena cava, and by means of coronary veins. So that's why this is called the receiving chamber. Here right auricle, this left auricle is also called the receiving chamber because it receives the oxygenated blood from the lungs by means of left pulmonary veins and right pulmonary veins. So I'll depict here, these are the receiving points. The oxygenated blood is received by this auricle. Left auricle receives the oxygenated blood, while as right auricle receives the deoxygenated blood from the body. So here's a question: why these two auricles are thin rather than thickness, or we can say that they are very thin rather than these two ventricles are thick in nature, while as they are thin in nature. Why so? Because they drain the blood into the nearby these two chambers, that is called the right and left ventricle respectively. That is the reason they are thin in nature. So another point, here is a oval shaped structure called fossa ovalis, marks the presence of foramen ovale is an opening in the fetal heart, and it is near to the interarterial septum. Here is called the fossa ovalis, found near to this interarterial septum, and it marks the presence of foramen ovale, Actually it is the fetal is opening of the fetal heart. So here is a, we can say, the presence of a structure called the fossa ovalis. So you must remember this thing as well. Then another portion of the heart, that is called the ventricles. Ventricles I will discuss here. These are called the discharging chambers. These are called the discharging chambers of the heart. Why